Welcome to a new round of SDH AM. John here, you there. Thanks for hanging out with us as you always do. Here's the rundown for the morning. Traditionally, in about 10 minutes, Casey White usually joins us, and she breaks down everything going from college to NWSL. She and Jess, the Wonder Twins, they were at Charlotte and New England this past weekend. Casey's hotel is encased in concrete. So we've been trying to figure out a way to get a signal out of the hotel that she is in, and that has not been fruitful. So we're pushing KCD to a time later in the week when she can come and visit, and she's not in a hotel encased in concrete. So the rundown for today, we got a lot to recap on the day from transfer from deadline day. We'll go into that, and there were some really odd responses at the end of it all involving Mark Gahey, for one, and Alexander Isak's agent apparently has come out and said some things. So we'll get into deadline day coming up here. And also, morning, Alex, we will also get into the rest of Major League Soccer from the weekend. We'll run through all those results and let everything kind of space itself out there to breathe a little bit. Bart Keeler is going to be joining us if his voice will allow. And we'll go over a couple of things in cards and calls. The upcoming window for the USMNT, that has the 6th and the 9th. You've got two matches coming up, one in 4 days and one in a week. And so we'll go over USMNT with Bart. We'll go over what's going on with the team. And then there's a lot of cards and calls to get into, specifically Fulham and Chelsea. We've got to get into the handball with Sam Surge. We will get into the removal of an official, basically the standing down, I think was how it was phrased. The standing down of a VAR because of what happened in Fulham and Chelsea. And it was an interesting piece, and I've got to remember where it was that I saw it. And it had to do with attending a preseason summit, basically, for officials, and how officials overseas were to kind of gauge activity around themselves and not find a way to make themselves the center of attention, even on controversial calls. And so it was intriguing to see that headline. And so we'll get into all of that stuff, and we'll run it down for you this morning. Also, in hour number 2, traditionally, as we do, we catch up with our friend Jason Stevens, and we get into the economics of soccer. And we have been getting into it for mainly. It started with, for those of you that have missed the first couple of weeks, it started with the whole transaction of Thiago Almada and Eagle Football Holdings and John Texter and all of those things that were just crazy and chaotic and the whole thing. And so going from that, we tried to figure out all of the whys of what's going on in soccer these days when it comes to economics and how it works, and what to look out for, the growing the growing interest of equity funds, which is today's topic. Equity funds, multiple companies sliding from one side to the other, one club sitting there and going, and this will be next week's topic, because you'll notice at the end of the conversation that we had today, it opened up another door. So we get into the economics of sports for the last half hour on Tuesdays, and Jason breaks down this time the equity fund interest. We get into Bill Foley and Black Knight. We get into TWG and Mark Walter and find out their funding and how it literally, and there was one thing that it didn't quite register with me until he walked us through it. The relationship really that Chelsea has with Bournemouth through their investments. So it was another intriguing conversation that we had with Jason Stevens, our consultant that we know overseas, and we get into the economics of sport. And next week, because of what happens this week when you listen to it, since we taped it yesterday, we'll be getting into all of the different companies that clubs create and sit there and say, well, this is us, this is us, this is us. Hey, this is us. Here's another subsidiary, and here's another one. And he pointed out that Chelsea have 22 separate holding companies. And basically what you do is you're taking all of the money that is there, and you're just basically you're sliding paper from one side to the other. And it was an interesting revelation, just the depth of it. We get into it a little bit this week, and we get into it more next week when we catch up with Jason, just basically finding out about all these different holding companies that are attached to teams and how they just shuttle paper from one side to the other so they can be compliant when it comes to the rules of the game, when it comes to financials. So that's in the last half hour. Like I said, Bart's going to join us leading into that last half hour. We got a lot of cards and calls to get into. We'll recap everything from deadline day. Folks are speaking out, and now about deals that happened, deals that didn't. We'll get into all of that coming up here in the show today. And uh, it was an interesting conversation that we had across the board with Jason. So we'll get into all of that coming up here as the show goes on. Opening kickoff brought to us by our friends at Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. There's your QR code for those of you who are hanging out with us, and you hit that QR code to start off your day. And what you end up doing when you use the code SoccerDownHere15 is you get 15% off of your purchase. And that in turn will get you the entire store at a 15% discount. So there you go. It is really cool to see how things are with Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. But once again, you go in, you purchase everything in the store. You hit that QR code at Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. Use the code SoccerDownHere15 on your purchase, and there you start your day with all of that. Now, it was interesting. We like to hear on the show. Actually, Dell, we'll get into it in a second. I know it looks like Jesse Eisenberg, but it's not. We'll get into it in just a second. After opening kickoff, this will be like the tail end of opening kickoff. I don't know if you share the same kind of appreciation for the underdog that I do. And I know that people sit there and they'll sit there and they like the favorites, they like the big names, all those kinds of things. And so it was interesting and laughable when Grimsby Town, and I know the screaming that you're hearing right now is from our friend Drew Dickinson, and when Grimsby Town knocked off Manchester United in the Gummy Bear Cup, 12-11 in PKs, there was universal laughter except for Manchester United fans who were gripping, as was Ruben Amorim. So we find out that Grimsby Town might have had a shenanigan going on, and it won't affect the result. But it was intriguing nevertheless about what went down with Grimsby Town, which sounds like a country song. But anyway, so you have Grimsby Town, and this is from our friends at Talk Sport and various other folks overseas. Grimsby Town have been fined £20,000 for fielding an ineligible player in that matchup in the Gummy Bear Cup, where they ended up beating Manchester United. They failed to register a player in time for their shootout victory in the second round. They needed to submit the player's name and register it before noon on the day of the fixture. Instead, documents were submitted just 1 minute after the deadline. Now, this is kind of bogus. 1 minute after the deadline, and you get docked 20 grand. Literally 20 grand for 1 minute after the deadline. At least it wasn't in the frickin' spam folder like it was with the SPFL. And I bring this together for these 2 points. So EFL determined the punishment would only be a fine, half of which suspended till the end of the season, rather than being tossed out of the competition entirely. The remaining half of the fine only come into play should Grimsby field an ineligible player for a second time this season. In an EFL statement, it was confirmed Grimsby self-reported the infraction the day after they'd beaten United in a penalty shootout. Quote, the board further noted the club's non-compliance was not deliberate, with no intention to deceive or mislead. Grimsby issued a statement of their own and put down the clerical error to, quote, a computer problem being experienced at the club. We accept the fine imposed and fully recognize the importance of adhering to the competition rules and regulations. This mistake was not deliberate, and the club acted transparently by self-reporting the breach as soon as it came to light. Since the incident, we've undertaken a thorough review of our processes and implemented strengthened measures to ensure it cannot happen again. We thank the EFL board for recognizing our cooperation and intent. We remain fully committed to maintaining the highest professional and regulatory standards, end quote. So Grimsby traveled to Sheffield Wednesday for the Gummy Bear Cup third rounder tomorrow. The player in question was a second half substitute in the loss to Bristol Rovers last Saturday, joined on loan from Bradford City for the 5-6 season. Didn't make the greatest of first impressions as he was the only Grimsby player to have missed from the spot in the marathon shootout against Manchester United. And Brian Mbumbo hit the bar and all that kind of stuff. So basically, because you were a minute late on the deadline in laying out who was an eligible player and who wasn't, 12:01 in the email, and yes, I know that Grimsby Town should have done it sooner in the morning. 11:58 on a timestamp would have been just fine. But for being 1 minute late in submitting your eligible players and your roster to the Gummy Bear Cup people, you get dinged 20,000 pounds. And literally, I'm quite certain that there are some folks overseas who are Manchester United fans who are sitting there saying, you know, punish, punish, punish. We need to replay it. You need to have one of those. I'm guaranteeing you that there are folks in the Manchester United cadre who are like, no, it was wrong. It was a minute late. We need to replay it, and then we'll win, and then we'll advance. But the EFL and the Gummy Bear Cup folks have just decided to ding a fourth division club $20,000, which is a lot of money for them, for being a minute late on a timestamp for a roster submission. So, like I said, that's why I brought up opening kickoff for two separate reasons. Grimsby Town had an eligible player. They still won. He was the only player who missed in the PK shootout that went 12-11. And then at the same time, it was at 1 minute past the deadline on the email. But like I said, Grimsby Town should have sent it that sooner than noon the day of. Like I said, 11:58 would have been fine. But they didn't. They get dinged $20,000. And like I said, for a fourth division club, half of it suspended. You know, I get it. But still, two separate things involving Gummy Bear Cup. One, you ding a fourth division club $20,000, which was really 10 until further notice, for an ineligible player. And it was for a minute after the deadline. Come on, man. I know that the Gummy Bear Cup folks are sitting there. We got to figure out something. We got to do something. We're not going to turn the match over. We're not going to have a do-over or anything like that. So why don't we ding them a lot of money? Half of it suspended. Intriguing nevertheless, but 1 minute after the deadline, you get dinged $20,000. What happens if it's 2? Is it 40? Is it proportional? I wonder how it looks. Anyway, that was when that came across the desk, it was intriguing for multiple reasons. So, ineligible player, wasn't registered, and he's the only one who missed in PKs, and it was a minute after the deadline, and it's $20,000 for doing it. Then Grimsby Town puts out the paragraphs of the release and everything, and they say the right things. But Grimsby Town and Sheffield Wednesday tomorrow in the Gummy Bear Cup third round. The other part to the discussion here, I know that Dell was looking at close. All right, so if it was pre and David, you know, there is a part of me that does need to pick up a pre-T-shirt. I do need to pick up a pre-T-shirt. There have been looks early on. Yeah, they did. Abby did. That's true. They did lose on their own. So morning, Alex. Morning, Abby. Morning, Dell. Morning, Derek. Morning, David. And morning, Abby. Okay, here's the shirt as we continue opening kickoff. Yesterday, and it's hard to believe that it has been 45 years We go back 45 years, and I don't know how many of you know the story of Terry Fox. And Terry Fox in 1980 wanted to run from one end of Canada to the other to try and find a way for Canada as a nation to do better when it comes to cancer research. 1980. And he had lost part of a leg because of cancer when he was a teenager in British Columbia. And so what he wanted to do as a young man, he wanted to run across Canada, and it was called the Marathon of Hope. And he wanted to bring more awareness, and he wanted to do it by running a marathon a day across Canada. Started out, and there are various 30 for 30s and documentaries and things like that that are on this particular mission of Terry's. And yesterday was the 45th anniversary of him having to stop the Marathon of Hope because his health had deteriorated to a point to where he couldn't continue. And by the time he started in Nova Scotia, he dips his foot in the water, and he comes in early on when he's in the Maritimes and when he's in Quebec. There really isn't a whole lot of folks that are paying attention. Folks are honking their horns, and he and his brother kind of running by the side of the road, and he's getting run over, and he's running at night and all this kind of stuff. By the time he had gotten into Ontario province, it had really picked up a lot of steam. And then there's the videos of him going into downtown Toronto, and he's supposed to stop at City Hall and have a big presentation, and the Maple Leaf Stars are there to greet him and everything. By the time he'd gotten to Toronto, it had overtaken the country. And so he continues it down into Ontario province, but yesterday was the 45th anniversary of the day that he had to stop. Because of that, obviously, it picked up more momentum and more awareness. And since then, the Terry Fox Foundation has been a great anchor for cancer research north of the border. And so this is where this comes into play. This is one of the Terry Fox Foundation T-shirts that they push out on a yearly basis. Full disclosure, we do contribute to the Terry Fox Foundation, and we do as one of our deductions every year, one of the causes that we follow. And so you may see me from time to time during the run or just during the year in general bust out one of these T-shirts. Most of the time they're in French just because it's kind of cool. But yes, this is one of the Terry Fox Foundation yearly T-shirts to once again have us remember about the Marathon of Hope, have us remember about Terry Fox, have us remember about those who are close to us and those who are not, who are fighting this stupid disease that we are still having to chase after all of this time. So yesterday was the anniversary. It took me a day to figure out where my T-shirts were. I grabbed this one. That's why I'm wearing it today instead of yesterday. And cancer, full disclosure, once again, has hit everybody here pretty hard. And the boss and I have lost 3 people within the span of a year because of various versions of this infernal disease. So yesterday was just a reminder about extra effort, being there for those who are there for you, regardless of the circumstance, those kinds of things. So take yesterday, take today, take every day. Remember those who are fighting a battle that you may not know. You may not know the extent of the battle that they're fighting. Be there for each other. Be there for everyone in your circle because you never know who you're going to touch. That's your opening kickoff. It's Terry Fox that's on that's the T-shirt today. And sometimes I'll always try to be a little obscure when it comes to my T-shirts, whether it's soccer clubs or universities or things like that. But today was because I couldn't find it yesterday. Terry Fox, the story of Terry Fox. Go look it up, and I know that you probably would end up going down a rabbit hole. But anyway, Terry Fox, anniversary yesterday of the end of the Marathon of Hope. But the hope still goes. The marathons are run every single year. There are marathons that are run here in the United States that celebrate Terry Fox and the foundation and everything there. But the larger message: be there for yourself, be there for your family, be there for others, be there as a support, be there as that guidepost, be there as that bartender, giving an ear, lending a shoulder, those kinds of things. So that's opening kickoff. Brought to us by our friends at Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. That's your QR code right here. Once again, you go to Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. You hit that QR code. Thank you, Abby. Start your day with Kickoff Coffee. And when you check out the door, don't forget to use the code SoccerDownHere15. You get 15% off your purchase. They, in turn, take 10%, reinvest it into youth games, youth initiatives. Brought to us by our friends at Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. Okay. I know that Bart's going to join us at some point here between now and 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, he'll be out the latest because 10:30 is when we have the Jason Stevens interview about the economics of soccer. So yesterday was the end of the transfer window in European football. And there was some stuff that went crazy at the end. And folks were going, then they weren't. Prices were agreed to, then players didn't go. Crystal Palace got to the point to where they had a goodbye video from Mark Gahey produced that has been since leaked this morning. And Mark Gahey ends up not going to Liverpool for £35 million. That's how crazy it gets. You get exit videos that were now leaked online. And apparently what happened at Crystal Palace, he was actually having the medical. Palace unable to complete a loan move for Brighton defender Igor Julio, who is opting to sign for West Ham. Deal sheet for Gahey's move had been submitted. He's going to stay with Palace. TalkSport understands that Palace manager Oliver Glasner played a direct role in the defender staying at the club. Glasner threatened to walk away, according to TalkSport, if Gahey was sold, having failed to sign 2 center backs during the summer window. Gahey not becoming a Liverpool player, goodbye to Palace, was apparently posted on the 280-character app. Featured a montage of the best moments since signing from Chelsea, all the goals, the FA Cup, and then the club wrote on the screen at the end, "Thank you, Skip," although they'll now get the chance to have that video just be something that's in the ether. So Crystal Palace produces a goodbye video, and he didn't goodbye. So you had that for Gahey. So last year of his deal at Crystal Palace, that is a part of what happened yesterday. Alexander Isak's agent had a parting shot for Newcastle. Vladko Lemic sends a message to TalkSport after the client's move to Liverpool went through on deadline day, £125 million. And so you have Lemic sending quotes to host Jim White. The message reads, quote, "It's nice when you have someone to be with, but it's even nicer when you know who you will never be with again." No more to it than that, but that was the note that got sent. Isak said nothing throughout the whole process until the night of the PFA Awards. You'll remember when he put out the statement after being named in the Team of the Year but chose not to attend. He referenced broken promises, stated that the trust between he and the club was irreparable, and allowing him to leave would be the correct course of action. Newcastle responds with a statement of their own, and from that point on, Eddie Howe didn't speak to Isak. Newcastle issues a 37-word statement once the deal went through. Player hasn't said anything about Newcastle on social media, and the only two players to acknowledge Isak's move publicly, Anthony Gordon and Sven Botman. Gordon went on social media, said some nice things, as did Botman. And so they had tributes on Instagram. So Stryker did mention the broken promises. Amanda Stavely promised Isak a new deal before she left the club. Ex-sporting director Paul Mitchell decided a new deal shouldn't happen because he had over 3 years left on his current deal. Talks were canceled. The PIF gets involved as last-ditch efforts heading into the final week of the window. Results of the conversations, Isak still wanted to go. Magpies end up swooping in for Nick Voltemade. Then you get £69 million spent on the German, who turned down Bayern Munich to make the move to Newcastle. Newcastle had been turned down by Joao Pedro, Hugo Ekitike, Benjamin Sesko, and still everything was still quiet on the Isak front. Then they pick up Johan Vissa for 55, following the international also going on strike from a move from Brentford. And so you almost work it out evenly with Voltemade and with Vissa, 69.55, 124. So basically, you spent the same thing. It was a wash. Maybe $1 million that wasn't spent. Isak out for 125, Voltemade and Vissa in for 124. So it was one to the other. But Alexander Isak's agent texts Jim White and says that there's stuff that they ain't happy about. And by the way, folks, we do have breaking news out of Major League Soccer. Benjamin Kromaski is leaving Inter Miami CF. He is on loan to Parma in Serie A. Announced today, loaning Benjamin Kromaski to Parma Calcio 1913 through the end of the fiscal year, June of 2026. Now that we are in the new fiscal year, Kromaski is at Parma on loan until June of 2026 when the fiscal year ends. Parma will also hold an option to purchase. Kromaski becomes the fifth Messi and Friends Academy product assigned for the club's first team in November 22. First Academy product to reach 100 appearances, 107 across all comps, 8+9 in the stat sheet. Important player in clinching the inaugural Leagues Cup title in 23, Supporters Shield in 24. Initially joined Inter Miami in August of 21, rapidly ascending through the club's youth ranks. U17, GA Cup semi, MLS Next All-Star nod. Excelled MLS Next Pro with Messi and Friends 2 and 22. Professional debut, 5+1 in 13 appearances, 8 starts. The number that has been linked to Kromaski is $4.5 million. Nothing that has come out this morning has reinforced that figure. Let me check quickly and see if there is anything that has been added. So, as of an hour ago, you get the good luck postcard. Fabrizio Romano quoted yesterday, and this is 2 days ago, and this is where I got the number. Loan with a €4.5 million buy option clause isn't mandatory. The medical was this week for the midfielder to leave, and so now it is officially official, on loan with an option to buy. And Nicolo Schira is adding the €4.5 million figure. Contract until 2030. So it's a 1+4. So the loan is the 1, gets you to June of 26, through June of 26. Then 4 beyond that. And so if you look at 1+4, it could end up only being €900,000 a year if Kromaski is picked up. And so Don Garber had alluded to at Leagues Cup, that the Leagues Cup final, that there would be a major transfer announcement made. And so Kromaski has gone onto social media to post a thank you. But is this the actual move that he was alluding to? So 1+4 won't be a whole lot on Parma's plate going forward if they do pick up the option to buy. So Kromaski is out on loan to Parma. And then you see that Parma has the option for another 4 after this fiscal year. And so a lot of folks may lean back and remember that Benjamin Kromaski was not a fan was not a fan of how he, for a double negative, was not a fan of how he wasn't being used by Javier Mascherano, and said it publicly. And I don't remember the date, but we probably, tell you what, let's do this. Kromoski. Let's see. If I go Kromoski, I'm going to do a search real quick. Kromoski Mascherano. So Kromoski wanted to play more, wasn't happy with his role. And this was back August 17th. August 17th. So Messi and friends win 3-1 over LAG. So Messi returns, gets an assist. Drake Callender. So remember, this is the transfer window for Messi and friends. Outbound. Callender to Charlotte. DeAndre Yedlin gone, earlier deal. Then you bring in Rodrigo de Paul. You think about bringing in Piovi to help you out defensively. That deal doesn't go. 10 American players on the 29-man roster, and this was before Kromoski ends up exiting this morning. So Benjamin Kromoski, at 20 years old, says, I'm frustrated, I want to play. I think the most important thing for me is to be at a very high level, and to get there, I need minutes and experience. I've played very little in these recent games, and I don't think it's because of my level. I go to the games, and I have no idea where I'm going to play. Mascherano, after the matchup with LAG, was asked about it, and he said, I understand he likes to play as a central midfielder. I also like to play as a central midfielder, but when I went to Barcelona, I had to play as a center back because otherwise I had no chance to play. The door to my office is always open for anyone who may be mad or doesn't want to play a certain position to come tell me. I haven't heard any complaints face to face. This is professional football. I decide where I think each player can give me their best. Kromoski, remember, started playing central midfield, both wings, filling in at left back for Jordi Alba when he was suspended. 1,298 regular season minutes, were 10th among the roster, 1 goal and 4 assists. Kromoski and other folks trying to get their minutes. But the larger issue here, once again, Kromoski not happy about playing time and vocal about it. Then he ends up a couple weeks later being loaned out to Parma. Kromoski wasn't wrong. To get better, you need minutes and playing time. You now get them in Serie A. The logjam that was created with the pickup of Rodrigo de Paul, and if I'm Javier Mascherano and there's a choice of playing Rodrigo de Paul or Benjamin Kromoski, it's a no-brainer. So I understand Benjamin Kromoski being frustrated about the lack of minutes. Javier Mascherano and Messi and friends are trying to win as many championships as possible. That's why you bring in Rodrigo de Paul. If, in the vision that Javier Mascherano, and this applies for every team, Monday through Friday, Sunday through Friday, however you want to put it, every team out there on this or any other planet is going to have practice time between the beginning of the week and your match day. If you practice the rear of your front off, that's what you should be doing anyway. And I would think that if you want to play, you're going to do whatever it takes within your own universe to give the coach the opportunity not to say no for a double negative. But when you bring in Rodrigo de Paul, that's going to make things difficult. I understand the frustrations of a 20-year-old who wants to play. I know how talented Benjamin Kromoski is. But you're kind of roadblocked. And when you say something like what you say publicly and it comes out in the medias, that's not going to help your cause. And so Benjamin Kromoski has been loaned to Parma. You wanted the chance to play and get regular minutes. Now you get the chance to prove yourself in Serie A. And you get to find out what your own constitutional makeup is, because you're on loan. This season is yours at Parma, Benjamin Kremoski, and you can do with it as you wish. I know that you're going to bust your ass because you have a point to prove. That should be a normal behavior pattern for anybody. You're in a new environment. You're the new kid in town. You have a purpose. You know what you want to perform and do. You now get to do it in Serie A. And for Parma, if you think about it, once again, €4.5 million on the possibility of a 5-year deal. €900,000 a deal. That is not a bad distribution. That's pretty good for a team that's fighting to stay in Serie A. But the lesson here might be multifold. Javier Mascherano said his door was open. Hadn't heard anything. Then Kremoski comes out publicly and says what he says. Kremoski is now at Parma on loan for the home stretch of the season in Major League Soccer. Just to give you an idea, the lineup last time out in Leagues Cup, just to give you an idea as to what it was that Seattle was staring at, and we probably should check the last couple of weeks with Kremoski and his stats. So Seattle and Messi and friends, the lineup for Messi and friends was the following. And obviously, Kremoski did not start. Ustari in net, Jordi Alba, Maxi Falcone, Gonzalo Lujan, Ian Frey at the back. Midfield, DePaul, Busquets, Yannick Bright, Allende, Suarez, and Messi. That's your rundown. Segovia, Pico, Kremoski comes in for a cup of coffee in the 85th, replacing Yannick Bright. So for me, it is literally looking at situations and trying to figure out, okay, when can Benjamin Kremoski come in and give me minutes? Can I use him to start? Can I have him come off the bench? Apparently, Yannick Bright was showing more and fit what he wanted to do involving Seattle. So you have the lessons, I guess, another lesson about being a professional athlete shown once again this week. So you look at Kremoski's numbers, 22 matches, 16 starts, 1,388 minutes, which puts him ninth in minutes, ninth in minutes on the club. Behind Busquets, Alba, Suarez, Messi, Ustari, Allende, Segovia, Allen, and then you have Kremoski. He was ninth in minutes. 6 times he was subbed in. He did have the 1 goal. He also had 4 assists on the season. But he wanted to start, wanted playing time. He was ninth in minutes. Behind the big 3, and really the big 4. The big 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you take them out, Busquets, Alba, Suarez, and Lionel Messi. You take them out of the discussion. Your keeper, Ustari. Then you had Allende, Segovia, Noah Allen, and Benjamin Kremoski. So outside of the big 4 and your keeper, you were 4th in minutes. And now you get to prove your wares at Parma. So maybe lesson learned for Benjamin Kremoski. We'll see. We'll see how it translates to Serie A. But Benjamin Kremoski loaned out this morning by Messi and friends to Parma in Serie A. And sometimes it's best to walk into an open door. Just saying. So, Del, we will be getting into, and Morning Wiley, we are going to be getting into when Bart Keeler joins us. We are going to be getting into that particular moment. And from what I understand, and this is from, and I'm going to reach out and see if we can have, because we did have the executive director of the Leagues Cup on. I do want to see if we can have him on the show for a post-mortem. And I do want to ask about this particular issue. And we're discussing the Luis Suarez moment. We will play it when Bart comes in. And yeah, it was like a security or something like that. A security kit man. Yeah, it wasn't one of the normal coaching staff, but it was still a member of the staff. Um, that was spit on. And I will say this. Hang on, let me hydrate here for a second. I don't know how many of you watched the Leagues Cup final and what network you chose. I had it on both 2 to NA and on Apple TV. 2 to NA, when they found the end zone shot of Luis Suarez getting into his kerfuffle and spitting on the member of the staff for Seattle, literally it was back and forth. Whoever was in the truck that was in charge of the editing, literally it was that they were taking a toggle switch, and literally it was going back and forth. Literally it's forward and shuttled to the point where you see it, rewound, shuttled, and they did this for like 90 seconds. Literally, it's like shuttling it back and forth, showing it in slow mo, and then rewinding it back. So if you didn't see it, here it is. It was almost like the sketch from the old Saturday Night Live episode when Buckwheat was shot, and Ted Koppel is asking the doctor in the ER, "Did you see it?" "No, I didn't." "Well, here's what happened." Literally, you had 2 to NA rewinding tape for like 90 seconds. It's like, well, here it is, and then you rewind it again. Here it is, and that's what they were doing. They were breaking it all down. Is that what I think it is? Why, yes, it is. So it was, I mean, 2 to NA, they maxed it out. They were showing it. They had the end zone shot, and they were locked in place. But from what I understand, this is, and like I said, if we can get the Leagues Cup executive director on to answer this question, I think that this is going to be considered a strictly Leagues Cup discipline. It is not an MLS tournament per se. It is CONCACAF sanctioned. Leagues Cup has their own disciplinary committee. Remember, after stage one, you had some elements that were there, Anders Dreyer and other things. After phase one, the Leagues Cup disciplinary committee came out with their own set of discipline. And you end up with those decisions by the Leagues Cup disciplinary committee. We need to ask who makes up that. Is it internal to the Leagues Cup itself? Are there any external individuals that are a part of that star chamber that makes up the Leagues Cup disciplinary committee? Is it just Leagues Cup inclusive? Nothing from the outside, nothing from no one from CONCACAF, no one from Major League Soccer, Leagues Cup specific individuals that make up the Leagues Cup disciplinary committee. And is it just the Leagues Cup disciplinary committee, whatever that makeup is, that is insular and makes the decision specifically for Leagues Cup? Or is this something like Open Cup? But like I said, the one moment that sticks with me, or maybe two, literally Clint Dempsey, I think, still has an Open Cup suspension on his player dossier. So if he was to ever come back and play Open Cup for anyone, if he's on a roster, he still has to serve a suspension. I think he still has a suspension to serve in U.S. Open Cup. Cuauhtemoc Blanco, in his last Open Cup match for Chicago Fire, basically was spitting and taking swings at folks. And he was disciplined with a red card, and that was his last Open Cup match. So if Cuauhtemoc Blanco ever came back for Chicago or for anyone inside U.S. Open Cup, he would serve a suspension. So I don't know if this is that or if it is Leagues Cup insular to where it is just a Leagues Cup thing. So, you know, Wiley making the point of, Wiley would make the point, Wiley's making the point, it's a paycheck with Major League Soccer, something they can do of that. He's certain if they will do it or not, it's a bigger question. Man, and obviously, yeah, if will they will they do something about it? Will Major League Soccer do something? That would be a decision for a Major League Soccer. Someone's calling our landline. I can't remember the last time that ever happened. If Dempsey coaches, that might, Abby's asking if Dempsey coaches, would he have to serve it? I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, it would be a Leagues Cup. I mean, it would probably thread the needle on it and sit there and go, well, he was a player and let it ride. As a Leagues Cup, as an Open Cup participant, as a player, he would still have a suspension to serve. As a coach, I don't know. That is an interesting threading of the needle and how that would play. But we do have, like I said, we do have the end of the match, and it's the call from Apple TV. As I work it through in my head, Jackson Reagan, because he is 7 feet 4 inches tall, is probably going to get an envelope from the Leagues Cup Disciplinary Committee. You also had Suarez, Busquets, Tomas Aviles, I want to say Chelo Weigand, and Maxi Falcone. Falcone with the rear chin lock on Obed Vargas, I believe, at the time it was played. And you had Sergi Busquets with the short right to Vargas's chin. So I'm thinking in Leagues Cup, you're looking at some combination of Aviles, Weigand, Busquets, Suarez, Falcone. 5 players for Messi and friends. That's my guess. Like I said, I'll have to look at it, and I would probably do what 2DNA did, but I would do it from a larger picture. And then Jackson Reagan for Seattle and anybody else that might be identified along the way. That's just from a surface view. But the larger question is, what is the Leagues Cup Disciplinary Committee and how do they approach it? So, like I said, we'll play that when Bart comes in. Dell's like, Inter Miami should get booed in the rest of their away games. It wouldn't be surprised if they were anyway. But yeah, it was ugly. And you had, I mean, it was a tournament that had a lot of ups and downs and a lot of crazy attached to it. And it was a fun watch at points for the Leagues Cup diehard. There were some matches, I'm sure, that you sat there and you went, why are you having a doubleheader? These games are goalless draws and this stinks. But a lot of the time for Leagues Cup, it was really entertaining soccer. I think the scheduling was better this year than it was last, where you didn't have the big gap in your schedule. If you didn't make it out of group, you had 3 weeks to think about it last year. You went back into your league schedule this year. That, I think, was a little better when it came to the overlapping of the schedules and stuff. But for the tournament to end on a note like it did, I know that's not what the Leagues Cup wants. I know that's not what Major League Soccer wants, but we've got to get to the idea of, okay, what happens now? And how long is it going to take for them to have the decision that they're going to make when it comes to anything and everything attached to discipline for the end of the tournament? And Dell's going to drive to Charlotte to boo them. And Abby has a match in October. You need to put a shirt of some sort together and have all the Atlanta fans wear it. We got to figure out what to put on it. So that's how we go from talking about Benjamin Kremoski, who was really 4th in minutes behind the big 4, and your keeper being loaned out to Parma. So that's the big piece of news this morning when it comes to Major League Soccer. There have been some finalization of some other moves at the tail end of the window yesterday overseas that finally made it over the line. You've got a couple of them. Isha Samuel-Smith, season-long loan to Swansea, having rejoined Chelsea from Strasbourg. Samuel-Smith only joined Strasbourg in July. Donnarumma is official this morning. Donnarumma to Manchester City. That's official. PSG, 5+1, 30 million euro fee. So 6 by 30 is 5. Manageable for Manchester City. So that was big. And you end up with all of those moves. So if you go, say, let's say, ranked worst to best, according to our friends at the Telegraph and Mike McGrath, in order, worst to best. Fulham, because they really didn't do a whole lot. Kevin comes in from Shakhtar Donetsk at the last, and you lose half a dozen players. You spend 35, you drop 10. Brentford did a lot of business, 2 on a free, grabbing a couple of players. You spend 96.8 and literally outbound 152. Flecken, me, Norgard, and Bumo, Roslev, and Vissa to the 152 on the outbound, but you bring in 7, including Schaumann Kelleher. So you still make a profit of about 55 on your transfers, but, big names and replacing all of the firepower did not happen. Burnley, not a surprise. I mean, Burnley brought in a lot of folks. They brought in a lot of folks. A couple of loans, a couple of frees, not a whole lot over 10 million. Ugachukwu and Broha from Chelsea were the bulk of it. They were almost 40% of what you did. And then outgoing 3, 6, 9, 11 outbound. And you end up with an 81 million net spend over what you brought in. Wolves really didn't do a whole lot. You brought in 7 for 102, and then you outgoing 3, 6, 9, 10 for 97. So a little bit of a net loss. Newcastle listed at 16, and it was you spend 254 million, and you drop, outgoing, you get 162 back. So 91 million net loss in your spend. You bring in Elanga, Ramsdale on a loan, Voltamod and Vissa at the end, but Callum Wilson, Sean Longstaff, Matt Targett, and Isak. Isak, by the way, 130 of your 162 right there. Callum Wilson let go on a free. Jamal Lewis released. White and Targett out on loans. Crystal Palace at 15. Incoming, 5 players. You spend 52. Outbound, you get 60. 3, 6, 9, 13 players out for Crystal Palace. And the only money that you get is from Eberici Eze. Released, free, released, 3 on a loan, 5 of 6 on a loan, 1 on a free, another on a loan, 2 undisclosed with Edouard and Ume. Bournemouth at 14. Incoming, you spend 137. Outbound, you end up getting 158. So you still make money on the deal, on the deadline. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 out, 7 in. But when part of that is Dean Hewson, Milos Kirkesh at your back line, Zabarny, who we saw at Summer Series, going to PSG, Ouattara to Brentford. That's a lot of firepower out the door. West Ham, another one. You bring in 133, and you end up getting 55. You release 5 players, loan 4, 2 sent out on frees. Kudus was the only money that you get in the window. Yet you spend it on 8 dudes. Leeds at 12. You bring in 103. You spend 103 to bring in 10. And then you release 3, 6, 9. So 103 million on the table. You didn't get a penny back. Villa at 11. They did some late business, loan deals, Jadon Sancho, Harvey Elliott. Then 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 out. And it was an even spend, about $1 million either way. Brighton at number 10. You bring in 7, and you send Joao Pedro on his way as a part of 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 that are out. 6 of them on loan to lower division clubs. Everton at 9, 121.6 in on your spend. Dewsbury Hall, Grealish was a loan. Tyler Dibbling was your big spend at 121, and you only get 10 million in return. You release 4, you loan 2, you 2 go away on a free, and you only spend 10, so it's a loss of 111.1 to our friends at Everton. Spurs spend 162, only get 18 back because you loaned 8 players, you released 3, and you get money back on 2. The one that was 17 of your 18 million, and you spend Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. 8 on this on the expense report for Spurs. Manchester City spent 152, outbound 35. You lose 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, and a lot of them were big names. De Bruyne, Carson, Grealish, McAtee, Severa Naipan, who you brought in from Rosenborg and you loan back out. You bring in Ait-Nouri, you bring in Reinders, you bring in Cherky, who's going to be a problem, you bring in James Trafford. Not a shock. Sunderland did a boatload of spending, by the way. They spent 168, and they only had outbound 41. 31 of that was to came from Borussia Dortmund for Joe Bellingham. So a lot of money spent by Sunderland. We'll see what happens. Manchester United spent 5 at 232. When a player is loaned, the salary is it depends on the negotiation. Sometimes you end up with the home club that is the loaning out pays it. Sometimes it's the club that gets loaned to. It just depends on the player. 5 spent for Manchester United to the total of 232. You got back 61, so it's a minus 161. You know, Sir Jim Ratcliffe's not happy about that. Forest brings in 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14 to the total of 197, and they spend 55. They got 55, and all that really came from Anthony Elanga, so 61 million there. So a net loss of 135 for Nottingham Forest and bringing in a boatload of players. Arsenal at number 3, spending 269 and only getting 4 back. Chelsea, of course, being Chelsea, and Chelsea will be a part of the conversation at the bottom of the hour with our friend Jason Stevens. They spend 292, get back 301. So good pieces of business there, including the loan of Caleb Wiley to Watford. Liverpool obviously ranked number 1, spending 452, outbound 222. So a net 230 million loss. But you bring in Isak, Ekitike, Florian Wirtz, Milos Kerkesh, Mamadashvili, and Jeremy Frimpong as a part of it all, and you get rid of 3, 6, 9, 12 players there. So that's your window in toto. All right, let's see how long the voice holds up for Bart, and we'll find out what's going on with Bart as we do cards and calls and find out about Nashville, because one of the moments we're talking about is Nashville. How are you?
John, I think I'm okay.
Okay. Just figured we'd ask.
I, I haven't, obviously, I haven't got home yet. That's why I'm not on camera. I am in my car heading back from Nashville. And John, I will say, for the first time in what seems like forever, we're heading home with 3 points, and it is a great feeling. Shout out to the Atlanta fans who showed up on Saturday. I think I will be saying this. I was genuinely shocked with how many folks we actually had turn up in Nashville on Saturday. I know it's Labor Day weekend. It's a fun town to visit, but a lot of people could have been doing a heck of a lot of other things than watching this team right now, and we decided to show up. And we were rewarded with a win from an unlikely source, and it's always fun to be able to troll Nashville fans.
Well, yeah. How was the crowd? Because I did see your social media early, and I don't know how long before the match.
It really wasn't that long before the match, John. It was 15, I think, was on the clock when I took that picture on the countdown timer.
Wow.
And it did fill in, but they do the multicolor seat.
See, this is what happens when Bart's traveling and he's driving. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That wasn't me. I don't know what happened.
Did someone
I
try
don't
to
think
call
that was
you?
me. Anyway, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. Hope not. We are. Anyway, there were people. It was more noticeable that there were more Atlanta fans, not like necessarily more Atlanta fans than Nashville fans, but you could notice the Atlanta fans because they're red and black.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was, for me, the takeaway from the crowd was there were just a ton of Atlanta United fans there, and Nashville fans were, I guess, doing something other than watching what is supposed to be a very good team. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. While you are driving, we're going to do cards and calls. And I want to start with and we had a bit of a discussion with this in hour number one before you joined us from, I assume you're still in God's time zone, working your way to the Eastern time zone. I don't know where you
Oh
are in
yes,
your drive.
yes, I am in God's time zone. So when
Okay.
you were telling me come on at 9:30 yesterday, I was like, that's 8:30 this time, and I will. Whew,
Yeah,
uh,
that ain't happening. Okay, so here is the end of the Leagues Cup match.
mm,
And it is from our friends at Apple TV, Leagues Cup, and Major League Soccer. This is the end. This is after the whistle. And here's what went down. I want to discuss the obvious things with you, but then I want to get into control and controlling matches and players and things like that after this. Here's the end of the match from Leagues Cup, courtesy of our friends at Apple TV, Leagues Cup, and Major League Soccer.
Suarez immediately when the game ended went and took a run at Obed Vargas. As ugly as it gets. As ugly as it gets.
This was a great final.
No, this was an unbelievable final. The reality is this. As Miami players throw punches and everything else, the reality is quite simply this. You had your chances to tie the game. You had the chances to play the game when the whistle was in the referee's pocket. When you do it after the game, you can miss me with the baby games. What a disgrace.
So Taylor Trollman kind of hot.
well, it should be.
And I was trying to think of the ending in my head, and I had 5 players from Essie and Friends and Jackson Reagan for Seattle probably getting envelopes from the Leagues Cup disciplinary committee.
Well, John, that brings up a great question. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but that is my question about all of this.
Mhm.
What the hell does Leagues Cup Disco have anything to do with these players now that the tournament is over? And that is going to be the question of how much backbone does MLS have and how much force are they willing to flex on all these players who are involved.
What I anticipate is that, and this was kind of the semantics that we were getting into. I'm fairly certain that since this is a Leagues Cup issue, kind of like what we've seen with Open Cup, and that's why I brought up Dempsey and Clint Dempsey and Cuauhtemoc Blanco as examples, that if what I anticipate is this, if any of the individuals that are set to that we would anticipate to be disciplined of some degree after what happened at the end of this match, if any of those individuals return next year, then we'll sit there and go, yeah, okay, we know.
Correct.
I would not be surprised if Luis Suarez retires. He's at the end of his deal, and there has been discussion that he would go back to South America and help run the club that he and Lionel Messi started. I would anticipate that one, if not two, of the individuals that were involved in the fracas, they may not be back as players anyway, but they would be part of the disciplinary process for Leagues Cup in this event that happened at the end of the match. That's just my gut feeling.
Right. And so that is, again, the problem here, John, is Leagues Cup has the control over this tournament, this competition, and they can absolutely ban, if not suspend for quite a long time, the players who were involved, specifically a guy who spat on and tried to punch other people. Um, and that is all fine and good, but I think the problem here, John, is, and this has been the reaction on Twitter for such the longest time, is what is MLS going to do about it? And I think that is going to be the issue that we're going to run into is Leagues Cup can, I think Leagues Cup can technically also find these players. That may happen. I'm
Yeah.
reading through the tournament regulations. The disciplinary committee can find not just the players, but the club as a whole can be fined and sanctioned, which I think is very likely to happen on multiple fronts. But I mean, that's the problem is um, what does MLS, what can or will they do? Because while there are obvious stipulations in collective bargaining agreement and other contracts that they may sign, that is like basically saying you can't do this and we can punish you if you do it. It wouldn't surprise me if only Jackson Reagan's the one from the league getting punished because you got it. And this is conspiracy theory, and I'm sorry, but it's consistent with what we've seen,
Mhm.
John, how the league has treated. I mean, Messi's suspension for not showing up for the MLS All Star game. So it very much would be consistent for them to say, well, yeah, they're banned from Leagues Cup.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so,
when
I mean,
when
that's
Suarez
my
is retiring, Messi's going to be what, out of contract? I think.
yeah, he is, but and there's in discussions for at
League
least
Nets,
another one plus
all,
one.
yeah. But John, the problem here again is if it just comes from Leagues Cup, that
Mhm.
again just shows you the problem of having Messi and his clown show in this league right now, and why people are so soured to everything Inter Miami does, and how much of a joke MLS has been in its dealing with this man who has not actually functionally increased the standing and value of the league within soccer fans in this country.
When you are, and it's probably a conversation that you and your fellow reffing friends have when it comes to keeping control of a match, knowing that it's a tinderbox, knowing that
Mm-hmm.
there are individuals that could set the thing completely ablaze. How do you and your group, when you're discussing these things, try to handle a match that you think might get out of control? You know it going in. It's gonna be it's like a championship environment. It's the last one, and there's a lot on the line. How do you and your friends discuss maintaining control in a match, but not taking away the personality of the match, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, John, because I think we've talked about this a lot, and we talk about this a lot as referees when it comes to finals or games of like real importance. That you don't want to be throwing cards around or sending people off or all these things because that does color the match. Unfortunately, it does put a narrative around the match that, oh well, if so and so had been there, then maybe so and so would have won, and those are all not inaccurate. I mean, if you sent off, I mean, in this match, just for example, I don't know, this is not at all what would have happened or could have happened. Say you send Leo Messi off in a final, right? Well, that absolutely will change a match, and it's hard to, it's hard because no matter what you do, if you let the players get away with it, John, you're going to be told, oh well, they just let them do whatever they want. If you punish them for it, as they should be, then you ruined the final. Why did he make it all about him? The reality that I always come back to is, yes, I want the players to decide the match, but the players' actions decide the match. And if they do things that, John, are inconsistent with the laws of the game, against the laws of the game, and qualify as misconduct and bookable offenses, then they need to be booked. That's just the way I've always said to my fellow referees, and there's a few of us out there that do agree with that. But the overwhelming majority, I think, do err on the side of, well, we want the players to decide it. And so when you talk about control of a match like this, it's hard to not. A lot of referees, I think, don't want to insert themselves in this way, but I do think matches like this need a strong personality in the middle who's not afraid to, if not book people, have conversations, talk, tell people that they're not doing right because it this is soccer's biggest stage, right? You get to a final, it's the biggest stage you're going to be on up to that point this year. And you still want it to look like a game of soccer. You want it to look like a good presentation of the sport. And you want it to be fair. I mean, ultimately, that's our job. We want it to be fair. And it's not fair if you let players and teams, specifically as a whole, get away with some of the antics that some of these teams get away with because, oh, well, I'm afraid to give a yellow card for something that's a very obvious yellow card offense.
Ismail Elfath comes across to me as an individual who has great control in a finals environment, and
I agree. And because he's not afraid to give a card, but he doesn't want to give a card, if
right,
that makes any sense.
yeah,
He will do it if you deserve it. But if it's one of those where he can have the conversation about it, then he will. And to me, I've always one of the things that I've always tried to tell younger referees, and I should tell myself this, is there are some things that are absolutely yellow and things that are absolutely yellow cards. Don't back away from those. But there are some things that you can talk through. There are some things you can warn them about and say, hey, man, don't do a foul like that again because the next time it will be a yellow card for stopping a promising attack. So long as it is not an obvious, like, this is a yellow card situation or a red card situation. You don't give a yellow card for a dog sit situation. That is a red card. That's just how this works. There are lines and procedures that if you go against them, that is absolutely a yellow card or a red card. And you can't back away from those, but you do need to have some common sense of, okay, well, yes, this is a nasty foul, but I can have the conversation now here in the 12th minute of like, hey, man, we don't need to be doing that in this match. If you do it again, I will book you. Here's your warning. And it also, by doing that, should send a message to the rest of the players that, hey, this is the type of thing that we don't want to see in the match. No one else do it as well.
Abby asking, do you tell the captains before the match that you'll be making calls as they should be called? Do you have the captains conversation?
I mean, I will. I'll explain to the captains. Here's the problem. Depending on the match, right? In this one, yeah, you're probably having a conversation saying like, all right, fellas, I want to play fair. I'm not going to, if you have any problems, come talk to me. I'm going to be calling it fair. I'm going to be calling it, to hold y'all accountable. They're going to hear what they want to hear, Abby. These are grown man children. They're going to hear what they want to hear. And I think a lot of them proved that last night.
Couple of calls that I wanted to get into before you make your way home out of God's time zone and come back here to the east. The Sam Surridge handball
with 3 points. Oh gosh, yeah.
When that was initially, it was registered as an equalizer for Nashville, but then it goes to VAR and it's referred to as a handball, and the goal's wiped off the board. Once again, walk us through handball, and in this particular situation, it almost looks like the fist is out away from the body at a 90-degree angle as it's kind of ushered into the net. Walk us through the Sam Surridge call in your head and what you would have seen if you were on the field.
Well, if you're on the field, this is hard to see. I'm just going to put it that way because as a referee, maybe you could see the outstretched hand. Like you said, this seemed way more obvious than some other goals taken away for a handball that I think we've talked about. But This is hard to see because of the direction of play. I mean, Jaden Hibbert's just gone full on Superman mode. He's diving in front of it. The ball is falling down. Who knows where it's gone? The AR is probably going to have a trouble here seeing this again. Hibbert and like 17 other people are in his way. He's also making sure, like, okay, was he onside or not? All these things. So this is the benefit of VAR in action, because the thing is, whether that was an intentional or deliberate handball or the ball is away, the arm's away from the ball, that doesn't matter if it hits your hand in a non-playable part of the arm and it goes in the back of the net. That's the laws of the game. You cannot score with a handball directly from a handball, whether deliberate or intentional or unintentional. And this was very clearly a handball.
Yes.
But even if it had been, up against his chest and he had happened to just like tried to chest it in, but it hit his forearm type thing, it would have been wiped away because you can't, John, in this game, you cannot score with your hands, which is, that's the whole point of the sport we love. You can't use your hands. You certainly can't score with them.
Unless you're Diego Maradona.
That was to England, John, and then you get special dispensation as long as
the other moment that I wanted to discuss with you before you put both hands back on the wheel is the Fulham-Chelsea match. Anthony Robinson comes out on his Insta, IG, or Gram, and it is an assessment of Premier League officiating after the PGMOL admits they incorrectly ruled out Josh King's goal against Chelsea on Saturday. And I'm killing time because I know that Bart has to be traveling from one cell to the next. Video assistant referee Michael Salisbury stood down for Sunday's Premier League clash between Liverpool and Arsenal after officials confirmed he'd made a mistake to disallow Fulham's goal at Stamford Bridge. The decision, once again, causes people to get more mad. Jedi Robinson hits out on the overall standard of refereeing in the Premier League. Quote, and this is on his Instagram: "If they can check something for 5 minutes and still get it wrong, then what's actually the point? Standard of officiating has been shocking in the Prem for too long now." That's what Jedi put on his Instagram. Telegraph understands that Salisbury's withdrawal from Sunday's encounter was a result of his involvement in an incident during Saturday's match. Salisbury intervened to ask match referee Rob Jones to go to the monitor after Josh King had scored 21 minutes into the match. Goal was chalked off when Rodrigo Muniz was adjudged to have stepped on Trevor Chalobah during the build-up despite minimal contact. It was regarded as a careless challenge, and the larger point was that it was a skill move and not a careless challenge. This is Bart. I'm going over the background of the other moment that I wanted to discuss with you, and it's from Fulham and Chelsea.
Sorry, I left Nashville and the cell service went out. You know how Tennessee is.
Yeah, I do, as well as you're heading to Murfreesboro.
Yeah.
So you have the moment in the match where Josh King scores for Fulham and it's supposedly tied. But then you have VAR intervene to ask the ref, Rob Jones, to go to the monitor. Rodrigo Muniz is adjudged to have stepped on Trevor Chalobah during build-up despite minimal contact. The intervention, subsequent overturning of the goal, and former Premier League referee Graham Scott described the decision as indefensible. It is understood the PGMOL acknowledged the decision was an error and the incident did not meet the high bar for intervention as a clear and obvious error, and that Howard Webb contacted Fulham to communicate the verdict. You had the swap out. John Brooks ends up taking Salisbury's place at Stockley Park for Liverpool and Arsenal. Change of personnel, which was reported to have been made Saturday afternoon, meant that Langford and Banks were deployed as fourths and VARs in Villa and Crystal Palace Sunday night. So you have Josh King score, and the game's tied. But VAR says go back and look at Rodrigo Muniz, who, in the process of doing a 360 spin move with possession of the ball, steps on Trevor Chalobah's cleat while he's in the middle of the move. And so he basically is trying to do-si-do around Trevor Chalobah in the middle of the do-si-do. I don't know if it was during the do, the si, or the second do. He steps on Chalobah's cleat. The buildup eventually turns into a goal, but it was regarded as a careless challenge instead of a skill move. And that was what was off the board.
I'll just say this. Generally, you probably shouldn't be allowed to step on people in the game of soccer, right? I think that is a fair and reasonable statement to make. But yes, I think in the context of this, I understand why. Here's what I think PGMOL is saying, John. At least my interpretation. They're not saying this wasn't not a foul or this was a foul. They're not making that statement. They're saying we do not think this is the type of way that the VAR should be intervening or suggesting.
Yeah, it does.
So I think if you were to ask many referees, you would say, yeah, that's probably a foul, right? You probably shouldn't step on someone. And it seems harsh, but even if you're doing a skill move, you probably shouldn't be stepping on someone. But I think it's also fair to say this was a kind of a. I agree that this is probably not something that VAR should be intervening, right? This is not a clear and obvious error. That's it.
So that's I think the larger step back in this is that the call on the field should have been a clear and obvious error, and for VAR to intervene is the larger issue in this, not necessarily the fact that as Rodrigo Muniz is trying to create a 360. He's in the air and comes down on Trevor Chalaba's cleat in the middle of his move, and then it eventually creates the goal. It is the clear and obvious aspect, really, that should be looked at here, and not the fact that, yeah, Muniz, by the letter of the law, did commit a foul by stepping on Trevor Chalaba in the middle of his 360.
That's 100%, and I think they are right, but they're not going to come out and say, yeah, it's a foul. That's obviously not what they should be saying, because you don't want to judge. Again, with VAR processes, you don't want to issue statements about did we get it right or wrong, because then you're going to have a problem with, well, why didn't you do this or this and all that. And sometimes you do have that, but you don't want to have to rise to that level. But saying this is probably not the best use of VAR, this is not proper use of VAR, is the correct way to go about this, because I think, again, there are times that you see things that may or may not be fouled, right? One referee may have blown his whistle, the other referee may have not. It's not clear knowledge.
Yeah. And that's what you gotta. And this is one of the things that we always try to discuss is VAR overreach, and the idea that you have in Major League Soccer a lot, but you had this big moment in the Premier League. In Major League Soccer, a lot of the times, sadly, you have VAR overreach where they're trying to re-referee a call on the field. And that's what you're trying to steer away from with VAR, but you have VAR intervening too many times, and that's why we always want to remind folks about these kinds of things. Go ahead.
I think VAR, we just talked about a situation with VAR that makes sense of why it's used. The referee and the AR were unable to see Sam Surge cheating on Saturday night. But no, that's a hard angle to see. That is a literal match-changing moment of a goal that happens direct, like the goal happened. This is not a possible foul 17 minutes before this happened, but Fulham happened to be in possession for however long. And it wasn't that quite long, but that makes sense. We're using VAR to check a goal because, actually, you know what? Yeah, this happened. And the VAR check was relatively expedient. I especially thought it was pretty quick when the referee went to the monitor, looked at it, and said, okay, yeah, that's a handball. He scored. Can't allow that. Boom, there we go. We're seeing the two instances of good and bad VAR, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the correct way to look at things. Is VAR sometimes works. Again, Sam Surge was disallowed a goal because he did a bad thing. Fulham being disallowed a goal because of a possible maybe foul, that's not good VAR.
We've got an international window coming up. Matches coming up in short order for the USMNT, for Canada, and everybody here in the hemisphere. CONMEBOL's going at it. What's going to be? What's in your spot shadow here for the next couple days?
Well, for me personally, we have to break down the roster and preview what we expect for the USMNT ahead of these games. I'll be honest, Thomas and I are not super happy with our coaching staff right now for some of the player selections they've made, but still excited to see what should be a pretty exciting attack for the USMNT. Whether or not they can fall in good position is a whole other story. But there are things to look forward to for this window, and we'll be recording Wednesday to hopefully get the episode out by Friday the day before the game.
And we just request, sir, that you get home in one piece, and we will be anticipating the new episode of the Soccer for US POD. Glad you had fun up in Nashville. Just get home safe, and obviously you'll pick things back up when you get here. Just middle of the afternoon. So stop by Buc-ee's on your way down in Calhoun and get all the supplies you need, and we'll catch up with you soon, my friend.
Yes, the Buc-ee stop will be made. So y'all have a great day, and it's great to come home with 3 points.
Absolutely. Bart Keeler, Soccer for US POD, and Bart is out the door. And so, and that was kind of why I wanted to look at a couple things and make sure that those two plays, as Bart described it, it was like the good and bad of VAR. And because of Sam Surge being obstructed, the view of Sam Surridge being obstructed. You had the end zone camera that had the easy look at Surridge with the handball, and the ball goes into the net for Nashville, and it's wiped off the board. Good VAR. Then you have the re-refereeing aspect of what you were looking at with Rodrigo Muniz, Trevor Chalobah, and the build-up and the goal. And then obviously Jedi saying what he said on social media. So we had good VAR, bad VAR this week when it comes to cards and calls. Really quickly, before we get into our weekly discussion with our friend Jason Stevens, a quick note from the NWSL. Boston Legacy has named their first president, and it is Jennifer Van Dyke, overseeing all business operations, club's long-term strategy. Last 2 years, chief executive for Super Plastic, an animation company with its own universe of characters, presence across multiple media platforms. Quote from Van Dyke, team president, decades of experience in digital media and strategy space, held senior level roles at several companies within the sports and entertainment industry. Mount Holyoke, began her career at IMG, 9 years at IMG, digital platforms, senior VP at Wasserman, developed partnerships, including endorsement and promotional deals, goes from there to team marketing, business ops at NBA, chief strategy officer with the LA Clippers, executing partnerships, and secured the first team jersey patch sponsorship with Bumble, went back to Wasserman, became CEO of Hoonigan, an automotive lifestyle brand, and now all of that has led to Jennifer Van Dyke now being the Boston Legacy first president, overseeing all business ops for the club as they come into the NWSL. Before we get into Jason, let me say hi to everybody and pick up anything that I might have missed. There's the Suarez t-shirt idea. Very cool here. Dell letting us know. It helped Sheffield Wednesday. Manchester United paying for everything to loan Harry Amos. Wages, accommodations, any bonuses. Very cool from Manchester United. And let's see. Dell wants to know if Messi and friends have any integrity as an organization. Owners must not have liked to see that, or do they not care? Don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if Jorge Mas has been. I'll check with Michelle Kaufman and see if she's got comments from the Mas family or anybody in the front office and find out if there was anything that was said. Actually, since we're thinking about it, let's go ahead and check the Miami Herald and see if Michelle Kaufman has anything from the end of League's Cup and the Moss brothers. Backlash and potential sanctions, according to Michelle from her article yesterday. Let's see. League's Cup officials investigating decisions on possible sanctions expected in the next day or two. So today, tomorrow-ish, somewhere in there. Comments on social media. Yamar separates Suarez and Vargas, laughing and celebrating with Cody Baker. Busquets punches Vargas. Vargas falls. Baker gets in Busquets' face. Maxi Falcone grabs Baker Whiting from the neck. Cello Weigand, who did not play, grabs Jackson Reagan around the neck as Freddie Juarez and Steven Lenhart jump in. Busquets grabs Juarez. Suarez and Lenhart shove each other. Toto Aviles grabs Reagan before John Bell tosses Aviles to the ground. Suarez goes to another part of the field, stepping on the foot of Sounders head of security Gene Ramirez and spitting on him. This is Michelle Kaufman's blow-by-blow. Ustari steps in, separates Suarez and Ramirez. Ustari, after the match, quote, I saw that there were a bunch of people all around. I couldn't tell you what happened. I was with Luis because there was a person who was standing there and didn't want to leave, and it seemed things were continuing, so I focused on that. De La Vega said he distanced himself from the melee. De Rosario called Messi and friends who participated in the brawl sore losers. They really wanted to win. The emotions got to all of us. Schmetzer congratulated politely by Messi. Schmetzer lamented the fight would overshadow the victory. Mascherano asked about his players' post-game behavior, said, quote, I have nothing to say because I was far away and didn't see what happened. Nobody likes for there to be these types of actions. Maybe there was provocation, but I don't know what happened. And they meet again September 16th at the Erector set. So Michelle Kaufman is anticipating some kind of decision next day or two when it comes to those particular activities that we saw. But Michelle Kaufman had a bit of a blow-by-blow of the whole thing. So add John Bell And like I said, we had Cello Weygand as a part of the discussion. So Weygand, Aviles, Falcone, Busquets, Suarez. I think that's it off the top of my head. And then it would be Bell and Reagan probably for Seattle. Oh, and Maxi Falcone. So 6-2 instead of 5-1. Morning, Derek. Morning, Lokeville. Let's see. And then that's yeah, David, it did go to VAR. The VAR brought either in the Nashville case with Surridge, it did, or in the Fulham case, it did. And the Fulham Chelsea was what folks were looking at as overreach. And the letter of the law that it was a foul, but it was the overreach is what should be the overarching conversation in the Chelsea case with Chelsea and Fulham, where it did go to VAR with the Surridge and the handball. So yes, it went to VAR in both cases. Okay, so morning, Dell. Yes, September 16th rematch. So that's where we are. Okay. It is that time on a Tuesday. And this is where we catch up with our friend Jason Stevens and we learn about the economics of soccer. And it is this time, and I apologize if you're watching on the video side, Jason's camera wasn't working and we couldn't figure out why. So you'll see an icon up for Jason as a part of our conversation. We get into the economics of soccer every Tuesday with Jason, who is a consultant in England on the sport. And this time we get into all of those big equity firms that are involved in picking up teams and having them as a part of their portfolios, and the why and the how and how they're growing with a couple of examples, TWG Global, Black Knight, Bill Foley, who's with Bournemouth. We got into Bowley Clear Lake a little bit and what's going on with Chelsea. So that's the crux of the conversation this week as we continue to learn about the economics of soccer under the multi-club ownership model, which we started this whole thing having to do with the Eagle Football Holdings. And there are a couple of interesting things at the end, and it always happens at the end, where you end up with a door that gets open, you go down that door, that hallway, and it sets up the next week. So here's this week's conversation with Jason Stevens about the economics of soccer and equity funds and how they're kind of really taken over when it comes to ownership and multi-club ownership models, and they're really increasing their presence here in the game. Here's our conversation with Jason as we learn about the economics of soccer through multi-club ownership. Time to catch up with our friend Jason Stevens about the economics of sport and multi-club ownership models. And Jason, I've always appreciated the education that you give us when it comes to all of these different aspects of who wants to buy, why do they buy, how it applies to all of the economics that we're seeing these days. This time around, you wanted to talk about market equity firms and their investments and the three-dimensional approach that we're seeing from this. What's your first thoughts when we talk about that?
Yeah, I think if we look at a couple of players at the moment, I mean, they're the well-known ones, but they've made a couple of moves in the market, the MCO space, in the last couple of weeks. So it's always nice to keep up to date with the fresh activities. Yeah.
So what moves did you want to have everybody look at just kind of a little closer here as we have our course?
So we've got Mark Walter, who's part of the Bowley Consortium for Blueco. And then we've got our friend William Foley, and they've just bought a sixth club in their portfolio.
So Mark Walter is TWG Global as a part of what his multinational conglomerate look is. I mean, all the different tentacles that he has going on. I saw the other day where Mark Walter is now the controlling owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. And then I kind of went back a little bit and I was looking at what else he's done. And apparently, according to Front Office Sports, there was an infusion of capital. I want to say it was in TWG to the tune of $15 billion. Is that right?
Yeah. They raised 15 billion, and 10 of that come from the Abu Dhabi investment fund with Bala Capital.
So when it comes to ownership of all of these different things, obviously, I think that the idea of a foreign ownership model, or something tied to city states right now isn't it isn't looked at as a one-for-one kind of a transaction. So you have Mubadala giving this money to Mark Walter and Guggenheim Partners and TWG, and in a roundabout way, it gives Mubadala an opportunity to invest in Mark Walter and TWG so he can get the Lakers. We're seeing this in soccer too.
Yeah, I mean, there's always loopholes in rules and regulations, right? But, one of the facts is these franchises, their valuations have gone so high in the last couple of years specifically that it's very hard for an individual on his own or a small consortium to be able to afford it. So you probably do need that little bit of help from these state-backed funds. I'm not saying that, we should endorse all of it, but it's one of those things, right? State-backed funds, as much as the money comes, with integrity issues, they do offer a lot of support and reach with that value as well. So it's not all bad, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not this opens the door for them to be able to tap into other franchises in the next couple of years.
Bill Foley, according to the New York Times / The Athletic a couple of days ago, they were in talks, his Black Knight ownership group, Bill Foley, Bournemouth, etc., Las Vegas Golden Knights in the National Hockey League. 3 days ago, it was announced that Foley's Black Knight is in talks to buy a stake in Croat club HNK Rijeka, and they were the winners of the Croatian double. So it's Bournemouth, minority stake in Lorient, majority owner of Auckland FC in 23, Hibs, a controlling stake in Moreirense, a strategic affiliation with Orlando City, and then possibly investing with Rijeka. So you now have Eastern Europe as a part of this, a third most successful team among Dinamo Zagreb and Hajduk Split. And now you're going to Rijeka. It's an interesting idea for Foley, as a part of his MCO at Black Knight, but you're going into Eastern Europe now. Are you looking for distressed assets, undervalued assets? What's the thought here?
Well, if we go back to the old Yugoslavia, this is before the breakup of the independent country. Yugoslavia was one of the strongest football nations on the planet. Reached a couple of major finals, European Championships in the 50s and 60s, and they've always been very productive in the talent pipeline. So, most people will look at it because of I'd say that the risk factor in Eastern football, it's been linked heavily, not this club specifically, but Eastern European football has been linked heavily with match fixing. It's been linked with fraudulent behaviour in terms of money laundering. A lot of big players have sort of decided to keep away from that until these countries have sorted themselves out, etc. So I do think this is a strategic investment, which offers. I've got a few angles for that to come into. Look, like you said, they are the winners of the double last season, but that's only their second league title that they've ever won. And the previous one was in a few years ago, 2017. But until then, they are the third biggest team in Croatia. But this whole investment in Croatia is about a strategic infrastructure project. There's a new stadium which is being built, 14,000, which is taking it up from their 8,000 capacity. There's a 200-room hotel. There's 3 residential towers there. There's a waterfront project going on with 300 million investment from the EU. And then there's another 177 million pound investment committed to what we call the Gateway Project, the Red Gateway Project. So there is massive infrastructure and industry development for the whole of that area. Part of that development is a cruise terminal as well. So, you're going to see more tourism there. If we look at what Inter Miami is doing in America, and we've also seen that in the last year, 42 countries now have direct flights to that airport as well. So, and plus, it's on a great coastline. It's got a blue flag beach. The Adriatic coastal line is one of the best in that region, etc. But more importantly, player development, right? If we look at the amount of players it produces, it produces actually 18 times more professional footballers per capita than Brazil. It's the 8th largest absolute exporter globally, despite only having about 4 million in population. It's the sixth globally in exports to Europe and in the top 5 leagues, and that's based over 20 years of study. There's a 25% increase since 2017 playing in the top leagues. So yeah, I mean, you can see why they've gone for them. You know, it's a good project.
With Black Knight specifically, if you go and you look at the website in and of itself, Black Knight Football Club, you have the story, you've got the leadership, you have, you know, the idea that, you know, perhaps somebody might want to reach out and catch up with Bill Foley or somebody there at Black Knight and find out about what's going on. But you're looking at literally it is Eastern Europe with the idea of Eastern Europe. You're looking at France, Scotland, Portugal, you're looking at the ANZUS region, and you're looking at England here. And so it's not just something where the focus is on the football team and the success of the football team, because if Rijeka's sale does go through, then Rijeka gets access to Black Knight's extensive scouting and all this kind of stuff. So all of the knock-on effects, I guess, for lack of a better word, Rijeka gets access to the scouting. They in turn would get better. They in turn would be an idea on the field of a larger presence when it comes to the European marketplace. They end up with the idea of playing in Champions League, Europa League, what have you. And so you have that access there. And then you mentioned the travel part of it, which is something that, you know, we did mention Live, Work, Play in the past, where you have the development of arenas and such. But the idea of, okay, let's turn these things into destinations for folks. I hadn't even thought of the travel aspect of it, where you want to try and draw folks to your product, and you do so through travel parts. I hadn't even thought of that as a part of this three-dimensional thing here.
Yeah, the travel and tourism is becoming big, and no, you've got to think ahead now. I mean, if you look at what the leagues are doing, you've seen Serie A, and we touched upon this a couple of weeks ago. Serie A and La Liga, they're now, you know, got agreements to play domestic games abroad in these America and Australia. Now, you know, if that's two of the big 5 leagues, who's to say that, you know, that's not going to expand and we're going to see the smaller leagues do something similar? But at the same time, you know, if we look at the other angle for tourism, it's trying to tie, look, if every football fan goes on holiday, you know, how do you choose your destinations? Well, you know, normally it's a hotel, it's a beach, etc. You know, but I'd say there is a part of it that if there's an opportunity to go and see a unique football match, I think, you know, that can be an attraction as well. I'm not saying the be all and end all, but it can be attraction as well. So I think, you know, we've seen success with Inter Miami when the cruise liners go into there. We've seen it down in Southampton when we get the cruise liners going to there. So I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if their attendance increases by 20-25% over the next couple of years because of that. But the other thing to remember is that Bill Foley has just come into 700 million, right? Because he just sold one of his companies to Clear Lake Capital, like Blueco. So they just sold it to 7.7 billion, and they were the largest shareholder in that company. And obviously they received the 630 million as part of point of sale. So Bill's probably got a bit of money in his pocket burning, so he wants to use it wisely.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned that where Cannae Holdings sells. Okay, so here's the tail end of that. Considerable recent success, according to our friends at The Athletic. In the day job as an investor, his investment firm Cannae Holdings makes $630 million on the sale of Dun & Bradstreet to Clear Lake. And so, folks, that might have kind of flown below the radar as a part of this, but now well, I guess I should phrase it this way. You don't wink, but you kind of do now. You now have you now have Clear Lake, the half of Bowley Clear Lake, now obviously associated with Chelsea, now kind of in the same aisles of the grocery store with Black Knight and Bournemouth. It seems like there's how much cross-pollination do we traditionally see in situations like this, or are Foley and Bowley Clear Lake, is this something that where you almost have multiple owners in the same league kind of doing business with each other, but they're kind of not? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, we see a lot of that in their day-to-day business life interest. I mean, like, even if we go back to the Mubdela Capital, I mean, look, one of the lines in that like 10 billion pound commitment was, you know, TWG giving Mabella $5 billion back and a commitment from its partners to give another 20 billion to Mabella over time for other business deals, etc. So, in there, we're potentially seeing a 35 billion pound swing in terms of future deals, so, whether that sticks to sport, which I believe it probably will do, sport and entertainment, we're going to see a lot more of that. But yeah, I mean, again, if we go back to, even Todd Bowley with Eldridge Investments, Industries, etc. I mean, he's got a number of cross deals. I mean, he works with Aries Management, not just in his Blue Co, but they do other sports entities together. You've got, all of them teaming up in the strategic golf group, the strategic sports group for the golf, etc. Where they've all like having a piece of the pie in there, and they're trying to overtake, or I won't say overtake, but they've got a significant stake in the PGA now, etc. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, private equity, as much as there's probably 100 different groups, it's actually small on the global scale, and so a lot of these guys are always going to cross over when it comes to the big deals. There's no doubt about that.
When it comes to this crossover, are leagues themselves, these entities, do they just kind of understand that, yeah, this is the new world, Mr. Columbus, and thanks for coming by? Or do you anticipate them kind of sitting there going, y'all, you can't quite cross-pollinate like this, because then if Chelsea and Bournemouth are kind of getting in deals, do you kind of sit there and you go, well, hey, wait a minute? I mean, what's the thought pattern here?
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's go back a couple of years ago, right? When Bill Foley took over Bournemouth, Chelsea's front of shirt sponsor was a group called Infinite Athlete. Now, Bournemouth owners, Ryan Sports Ventures, they own 10% in the Black Knight Football Group. That was their company. So Bournemouth was, in theory, on the front of Chelsea shirts. And that company got set up in the blink of an eye, and then in some weird way justified a £40 million a year sponsorship on Chelsea's shirt with only being in operation for like 2 months. So that was quickly taken down. I'll say quickly, over a year later. So yeah, we are seeing more and more of these backdoor deals taking place with obviously people that do businesses in other entities. The ironic thing is all these clubs are sitting there slating Manchester City and the Abu Dhabi Group, City Football Group, for having associated parties transactions. Is this any different?
When it comes to the state-owned, like Mubadala, that are attached to activities in the Middle East, how much of that are we seeing where they don't want to be the front man like you see at PSG? They want to be more like Mubadala, where we'll do a lot of stuff, but we'll kind of figure it out later, and you guys can invest back and forth. Are you seeing more of the Middle Eastern, North Africa groups that are state-run? Are they kind of working their way in as the underlying partners more now, after what we've seen with PSG and Manchester City, City Football Group, et cetera?
I think there's scope for more, don't get me wrong. And I think that obviously the transfer window is just closed, right? And what we've seen this summer is the big six really, really flex their muscles in terms of the big spend. So, I think now what you're going to see is an end of PSR, especially in England, in the way that it is at the moment, because you're killing competition. You're just allowing the big clubs to get bigger, all the better players, and you're crucifying the small ones. So I think you're going to see the end of that. And what that means is that will open the door for bigger and more investments, more collaborations, because some of these clubs in England, they've got wealthy owners behind them, but they've got their hands tied behind their back because of the PSR regulations. Whether there will be room in the lower leagues, and there will be room in Europe, etc., to make challenges. And don't forget, we're not, we keep going back to the Super League. That's not dead. So there will be opportunity for these funds to be able to get into football and help drive the landscape forward. I think we're still in its infancy, believe it or not. I'd say we've still got about another 70% of football that will benefit from private equity and these type of collaborations, investment.
Sheffield Wednesday, I know that we've been talking about it outside of our segments, kind of keeping an eye on Dafon Chansiri, trying to figure out what his next move is. That we did mention that John Textor was paired with someone who knows about these things and has been a front man for these things before. Now Textor says he's going on it alone. when it comes to these owners, and this is a sidebar question for this week, the owners that are with franchises that are in trouble, specifically like a Sheffield Wednesday, it's frustrating for a lot of fans why Davon Chansiri is allowed to function the way that he does. How do Bills get paid as best they can when you have an owner that's having issues, or is it just kind of, does the league help out in a situation like this to keep the lights on? How does a franchise stay afloat when the owner has problems or doesn't want to invest? How does that work?
Well, I mean, I think, it depends, right? There's a famous saying in England when it comes to football business, it depends. And it does depend on the situation. So if we look at Sheffield Wednesday, so they will receive central payments from the Premier League. And I'll probably say that's probably, a big chunk of their annual revenues. So when that payment gets distributed, I do believe that a number of the outstanding commitments will be paid from that before the rest of it, the balance goes to Sheffield Wednesday. And, football has sort of put this mechanism in place. I mean, if we look at like the international transfers, when money is owed to or clubs, etc., when an international transfer is made, the money has to go into FIFA's clearing bank. And every transfer has to go in there, whether it's Liverpool to PSG or Liverpool to Timbuk Rovers in Saudi Arabia. They have to pay into the clearing bank, and then if there's any outstanding debts or duties owed by, i.e. Liverpool or the other club, they use that money to pay it off, and then they give them the balance. But that itself opens its door to another conversation, because the process is 90 days, and what's FIFA doing with this money in the 90 days? Obviously, it's investing it in high stakes interest, and then they're claiming the money on that is going into the foundation, the interest, but that's another story. But, they have tried to put a mechanism in place to try and help clubs have their, pay off their debts. But, once you do the owners and directors test, you've got to, hopefully, you know that once that's done, you can't make people press the button to pay the bills.
Right.
So you've got to rely that the people that are in place, the integrity that they hold, is going to underdo that. But we haven't had too many examples of that happening. And yes, don't get me wrong, it causes distress because these players and staff don't get paid on time. And we've had Morecambe this summer in the English National League, and then you've got obviously Sheffield Wednesday this year. But in the scale of it, when you look at how deep the English football pyramid is, you've got 90 teams that are in leagues 1 to 4, and then you've got another 20 odd in the National League. And most of them are professional as well. We've got a really deep professional system in such a small, dense country. So, look, I'm not saying it's acceptable, but you're going to have one or two problems every now and again. That's just the nature of it, like you do in the high street, like you do in the financial industry. But, the one thing is that football does come together and football does unite, and, you get a lot of media attention as soon as it's, something negative. So, and, the football comes together to, put this spotlight on it, and hopefully it helps rectify the problem quicker than it does to let it go and end the football club. And one thing I will say is that we don't lose many football clubs. They may go through a period where they drop 2 or 3 leagues, but then somebody's there to reignite them, to bring them back, the phoenix from the flame type of attitude. So, and yeah, not many clubs we've lost in my lifetime anyway.
Yeah, Bury and Macclesfield come to mind, but
they're still alive though, aren't they? They just went backwards.
Right. And so that you had the reinvestment and the rebirth of those. Thank you for the mention about FIFA and the central accounting structure there, because I'm sure a couple of Atlanta United fans are definitely interested in that, especially when Thiago Almada goes to Atletico de Madrid and you have that transfer fee that's there and money that's owed on a sell-on. So that was a good little nugget. I think, one more question. Holding companies. Am I naive when I'm asking about, when you have companies just kind of slide the things over, like when you have, say, teams sit there and sell things to themselves, whether it's another club, part of the club structure, or hotels and things like that. I mean, how naive am I to think that it's just that simple for somebody to sit there and say that shouldn't count because you're selling it to yourself, but it still ends up counting even though you're selling it to yourself. I mean, it just, am I naive in thinking that folks should kind of see through that and not count it when it comes to PSR and FFP?
Well, yeah, everybody knows it's laughable. Okay, it's just people playing Monopoly on paper, right? Because there's not actually money coming in, and you're just moving it from one company to another. And look, Chelsea, I mean, if you look at their midcos and bluecos, etc., that they've got set up,
Yeah.
I mean, they've got like Blues Investment Midco, which is the holding company for Clear Lake's investment, 61% into that. And then you've got Blueco 22 Holdings LP, which is the Bowley Consortium, which holds the other 38. And then they've got 22 Holdco Limited, which is like a £500 million bond, or should I say investment, which is significantly, that's what sort of areas management gave them. And that sits just underneath them, but that's like 12% interest. But nothing gets paid until 2033, and then it all gets paid in one go. So that's 850 million based on that sort of calculation. And that's going to have to be paid back in 2033. All right, we've got another decade there. And the way that they're moving players in and out, they may make that money back quicker than we think. And then underneath them, you've got Blueco 22 Limited, which has got loans of up to 702 million. And again, interest at 3.5% there. And then underneath that, you've got a whole load of companies. You've got Stamford Bridge Projects, you've got Blueco 22 Properties, you've got Residential Limited, you've got Walsingham Property Holdings, you've got another Blueco 22 Midco Limited, and that's where the women's team has just suddenly been sold to. And then you've got obviously the Blueco Alliance, which is Strasbourg, etc., falls underneath that. And then you've got Chelsea FC PTE Limited, which I don't know what that is, Stamford Bridge Securities, Chelsea Football Club Limited, which sold the hotel and part of their training ground complex to themselves. And then you've got the merchandising, and then you have got the Chelsea Hotel company, and then you've got the car parks, and then you've got the leisure services, and then you've got Under the Bridge Limited. Man, it goes on. Stamford Bridge Projects. You've got 22 companies registered under Blue.
22?
22. I mean, yeah. And in that, right, and in that, surprisingly, is around about £1 billion of money, cash in the bank, sitting in all these companies collectively. That's another story.
And that, I think that's next week, because you know, I didn't know if I was just naive to sit there and say,
John, I've got this great one. I done this article a few months ago, right, which analysed all the holding companies connected to the 20 Premier League clubs, right? And in there, you've got a minimum of like 6 companies per club, minimum. But that's the smaller ones, and the bigger ones go up to 22 with Chelsea. And in there, collectively, you know, there's about £2 billion sitting in there, cash in bank. What is that money doing? You know, but the thing is that money's not connected to the football club, because when you like govern the finance of football club, what they do is they only assess the holding company that's connected to the club itself. So if there's another company, another holding company's got the hotel, the car park, other assets, the academy, then that's not analysed. That's not even considered. So there's lots of, and money gets moved sideways. It gets moved sideways, and nobody ever questions why money got moved sideways. And like I said, collectively, you know, when you see these, you'll see these reports come out in the next few weeks. Well, Premier League owes £1.8 billion in transfer fees and this, that, and the other. But actually, collectively between them, they've got over £2 billion sitting in the bank account. So the Premier League's doing nice, and the owners are doing all right.
and that's next time. My head hurts.
Mate, it's only going to get more complicated. That's for sure. You know, once governance gets hold of this, they put in restrictions, and then, you know, the guys will find new loopholes. They probably got all the loopholes already sorted out for the next time. Don't worry about that.
Sorry, that's Jason. I hope my and collectively our goal here is that those are this is informative when it comes to learning about the world game, because as you saw at the end of the interview this week, my mind was blown with some of the things that Jason has put together for us. I'm going to see if I can find a way to bring in that full screen that he had. Hang on just a second. So, it's in the download folder. No, it's not a screen share. It's an image. Okay, so here we go. All right, let me see if I can bring this to the fore, and let me see if it can fit here. So that is Chelsea and Strasbourg's ownership arrangement, including dormant companies. That is what Jason sent to me about the layout for Chelsea and the blue co's and the hold co's and the blue co hold co's and all this kind of stuff. So you see, and it had to be fine print just to make it all fit to the screen. So you have the Clear Lake side, which is the Blues investment. You have the Blue Co side, which is the Bowley side. Then it goes to 22 Hold Co. Then it goes to Blue Co 22. And then it goes to 5 others. The Stamford Bridge project goes to 2 more. Blue Co is linked to 6 more at the bottom, which is linked to Chelsea FC Holdings. Blue Co 22 is the women's team that Jason was talking about. So the 2 halves go to 2 more holes. Then those 2 more holes bust out into 5 more. One of those 5 busts out into 2 more. Another one is tied to 2 at the bottom. One at the end, the Blue Co 22 Midco, busts out into 3 more, which busts out into 6 more. So that's the layout for Chelsea. That is how Chelsea is doing this right now. 2 into 2, 2 halves into 2 holes. So that's 4. Second level is another 5, so that's 9. Stamford Bridge adds 2 more, that's 11. Blue Co 22 Midco Limited, right-hand side of the screen, goes to 3 more, and then one of those 3 goes to 6 more. So 6, 9, 11, 16, 20. And that's, and I think I'm obstructing here. So it's 21 or 22. And that's the link up of what you're seeing with Chelsea and Bowley Clear Lake. That's their breakdown of Chelsea and Strasbourg's ownership, including dormant companies. So that is the rundown of what you get with Chelsea, just as an idea. So that's that to me was when Jason sent that, that's what you're looking at. And so that sets up next week, and I know we're in added time, and I apologize. So next week in this time slot, as we continue to find the shuffling of paper and all the companies and everything, it literally is, as Jason said, Chelsea's got 22 separate holding companies that are attached to their day-to-day operations. And all the money that's there, all the money that's attached, all the different things. So next week, it'll be about all of the breakouts, all the little breakout rooms that the folks in the Premier League have. And they're not the only ones, but just as a prism for what you see every day to understand what's going on and how they break up all of the funds and how they sit there. And it's like, well, we're not solving here, but these folks are, but aren't you the same thing? Well, no, we're not. When the rest of us are looking at it going, well, yeah, you are. So that'll be next week with Jason. So like I said, I hope that I'm hoping that that this is informative, because like I said, we had one transaction here in our footprint that kind of set this whole thing in motion. And so we wanted to try to understand across the board how multi-club ownership works, how it goes from one end to the other, what the impact is, the shuffling of paper, all of the financials that are attached. And it is a 3-dimensional. This is literally like Vulcan chess. and it's economics. But we thought it was important to break down so folks can understand what's going on in the economics of the sport, where you see all these companies spending all this money and they're racking up losses. So yeah, we thought it was an important road to go down. And so that's why we, in that Tuesday last half hour slot, that's why we bring in Jason to talk about these kinds of things. Just as kind of like it's like, hey, this is going on and it's something you need to know about. And so that's why that's why we brought this idea to the table here on Tuesdays. And so that's what we're up to. Yeah, David. Yeah, the accounting firms. We always talk about lawyers making money. The accounting firms are making money here in these cases. So that's the whole look. And I mean, you, David, you probably know more. You definitely know more about that kind of thing than I do. But to bring in that full screen that Jason sent to me about Chelsea and the breakout, I thought it was important. So we'll talk about the breakouts next week, all the different holding companies and all this kind of thing when you're trying to sit there and have all this revenue and talking to folks. But yeah, the relationship between Bournemouth and Chelsea. Bournemouth and Chelsea are tied at the hip. So keep an eye on Bournemouth and Chelsea and see if there are any companies that cross over when it comes to advertising and shirts and sleeves and things like that. Okay. All right. Now that the transfer window is open and closed, the only thing we can do now is gossip rumor. We've done gossip rumor and innuendo. It's now what to watch, where to watch it, how to watch it before we get out of here today. Once again, tomorrow, Tyler's going to join us at 9:15. Busiest man in the Northeast, Dylan Butler, joining us at 10. And we're trying to figure out when we can have Casey White join us when she's not in a hotel encased in concrete. So that's the biggest thing coming forward today. Women, it is women's soccer, and it is on Paramount Plus. CONCACAF W Champions Cup. Both matches are on Paramount Plus and on ESPN Plus. Orlando and Alajuelense is at 7. Alianza and Gotham is at 9. Like I said, both of those are on Paramount Plus. ESPN Plus has them both. Orlando and Alajuelense is at 7 on CBS Sports Network. And so that's the rundown of everything today. Like I said, it's a light day, and tomorrow you get back into World Cup qualifying, all those kinds of things. But yeah, so later in the week, we're going to have Casey White come and join us, and we'll talk about Alyssa Thompson. We'll talk about the NWSL. We'll talk about what she and Jess were looking at with Charlotte and New England, and maybe a little college too as we head into the weekend. But tomorrow, Tyler, Dylan, and you, starting in a little less than 22 hours. So that is another go-round of SDH AM. Thanks as always to Jason Stevens, our football consultant over in England, as he educates us on multi-club ownership and its place in the sport, and as it grows, what we need to keep an eye on. Thanks to Bart as he was driving back from Nashville, and thanks to all of you as we walked through everything that happened on transfer deadline day and got us ready for the beginning of the season in the Prem and everything going on in Europe. And Benjamin Kremoski now is at Parma on loan for a calendar year, the end of the fiscal year, and then maybe another 4 if things work out for him and Parma in Serie A. So as always, thanks for dropping by here on SDH AM. Back at it again for another go around, a little less than 22. Thank you, David. That's what we always try to do. We always try to give stuff that folks can think about, have fun with, and at the same time, we want to inform and try to cover all of these things as we go. So back at it again, a little less than 22. From all of us here to all of you here, couldn't do it without you. So for everybody here, mucho platiel, play it safe. It's the end of the show. It means we get to do this. Back at it again tomorrow, 9:05 Eastern.